The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome back, everybody, for the second part of the two-part series, Uranus and Taurus Cycles and Archetypes. Tonight, the cycles. So we went through the archetypes, of course, Monday night. We will continue this series going around the houses to get your most personal and imminent effects of this long-term transit. As you can see, there 8 years. For the first 3 consecutive Monday and Wednesday evenings in April. So, all that information's been out there through the event newsletters. You must enroll to participate in the Around the Houses series. It's the same registration link to the webinar service for all 6 sessions. Just like tonight, we're going to create a PDF, as most of you know by now, and I always put the webinar video link right up on the first page of the PDF and a couple of audio links if you want to download the MP3 only and walk the dog and listen. If you want to stream the MP3 file right there. That video is the actual webinar that we're going to create tonight. So thanks for being a part of EAN with us. And I invite you to join us in Uranus and Taurus Around the Houses. We still need multiple house slots are open for your, really, it's an astral consultation with Kim Marie for an hour, so you must enroll first. I've got mostly the even numbered houses, interestingly enough, 2, 4, 8, 10, and 12 I know are open. Okay, so find out where 0 to 30 degrees Taurus is on your chart and send me your birth data if you're confused about that, and enroll and join us for that 6-part series in April, again, every Monday and Wednesday night for the first 3 weeks of April. With that, I'll turn it over to Kim Marie.
All right, thank you, Leroy. Sorry if I make a noise, everybody. You get caught up in your little fidgets of getting everything just where you want it to be. So welcome to the second webinar in part 1 of Uranus and Taurus. As Leroy said, we're going to look at cycles tonight. First of all, with EAN, you can study with us 3 different ways. You can subscribe to our free weekly audio podcast. You can, you can listen. You don't have to subscribe. You can subscribe to get the RSS feed to show up every time we post something on your browser if you want. But we also have our Astro Library. You can see 3 different sections on your screen. And of course, our Evolutionary Astrology course. We have 3 different segments. And the first one, philosophy. Second one, relationships. You can get that digital only, materials only, or you can do both. Now, I've been on a roll this winter. Saturn in Capricorn was done in December. You can get part 1, which will be the cycles and archetypes, and then you can also get all 12 house transits, or you can go in and look for just your transiting house if you'd like more specific information for yourself. And then, of course, we just finished the Chiron in Aries series as well. Part 1 is the archetypes and cycles, and the same thing with part 2. You can get all 12 houses, or you can go and just purchase the transiting house that you are interested in. All right, so here's Uranus and Taurus again with just a little more detail in regards to the fact that it's going to have about 6 months here where it's going to dip into Taurus from the middle of May to November when it's retrograde and goes all the way back into Aries for another 6 months before it dips into Taurus mid-May of 2019, stays there through 2025. So Uranus is about 84 years around the zodiac. And so it spends approximately 7 years in each sign or archetype of the zodiac. Here's just a recap. Oops, excuse me, forgot about I put this visual in. Here's just a visual for you of what happens when a planet goes retrograde and it's outside the Earth. That means Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Chiron, Uranus, etc. The Earth's orbit is inside the outer planet, so it travels faster, and it ends up moving forward to the point that it makes the planet look as if it goes retrograde in the sky. Here is just a quick recap on what Uranus retrograde in Taurus will work through. We studied all this in more detail, the archetypes class. It's going to revolutionize self-reliance via exposing anywhere we have insecurity. It is going to evolve our inner relationship with ourself and our environment. And Uranus retrograde will individualize our relationship with ourself. We're always on a path of improving or learning to know ourselves better. It will cause all kinds of sexuality shakeups, debates, revolutions, scandals, you name it. We already see that happening with Jupiter and Scorpio. When Saturn joins Jupiter in the opposite sign, expect more of the above, not going to go away. The survival instinct for evolving all species. In today's rapidly changing climate, it is adapt, evolve, or die. And that includes humans as well. It'll revolutionize our relationship to all the resources that we have. This goes beyond money. This includes food, clothing, shelter, your relationship to your vehicle, your relationship to the place that you live. Doesn't matter. Any resource, anything that's manifested can be up for a Uranian change. Now, Uranus will bring and emphasize when it's retrograde the long-term potential in which we develop new talents for ourselves. And this will then evolve into changing jobs and career and our ability to accumulate resources. Now, the distortions, as you see there, when Uranus goes retrograde, it will be very hard to remain in your laziness or inertia. Manipulations will be exposed. Possessiveness will be exposed. If you're hoarding, that's going to come to the surface to be thrown off in some way. If, all kinds of things, any of these Uranus and Taurus archetypes will just come into emphasis when it's retrograde, including exposing those distortions. Now, Uranus retrograde in Taurus is going to point towards Scorpio. And that Scorpio polarity will create any necessary cataclysms to expand our perspective of the universe, individually in our own world and collectively as various groups of people or countries, and even as a global society or universe. Taurus is fixed earth, Scorpio is fixed water, and they are the containers. And so that energy is going to be disrupted and expand or upset however it's necessary to break free and evolve these areas of our life and the areas collectively. We can have resource upsets of all kinds, you name it. And we can also have resource redistributions. In other words, how much more extreme can it get between the haves and the have-nots? As we said in our first class, 3 individuals in the United States have as much wealth as the bottom half of the population in the country. I don't know, what do we do? Get it down to 1 person and then we redistribute, or shake it up and create more equitable rules and norms? Stay tuned. Uranus retrograde will bring that to the surface. And of course, again, it's all about being able to have a more equitable fairness to how we are going to distribute and use the resources on planet Earth. And if it's only going to become more intense as the population increases. I don't know the years on how fast we double population, but it's getting to be a little ridiculous. And so more people, so many resources, unless we learn how to do it differently. There will be ethical debates over technology. Technology won't slow down with Uranus in Taurus. And as a matter of fact, technology with our body, wearing an e-skin to, take your diabetes blood sugar numbers in real time 24/7. 3D printing of organs and tissues in the body. That stuff is going to just continue to exponentially explode. And as we'll see in a few slides, is morality keeping up with technology? And of course, we can easily see an increase of sexual scandals and STD contagions. Remember AIDS, anybody? And what a scare that was? We could see another type of, contagion, easily spreadable via human contact with Uranus in Taurus with polarity Scorpio. And of course, it's going to become more and more important to want clean water, to be able to live in a safe environment with all the climate changes. That will intensify whenever Uranus is retrograde. And Uranus is, remember, retrograde 5 months out of the year, 42% of the time. And right now it's turning retrograde in early August and going direct in early January. So that second half of the year. As we move through Uranus in Taurus, it'll start going into turning retrograde later and later in August. It'll move its way through the month of August, the 7 years it's in Taurus. It'll move its way through the month of January, turning direct. And of course, distortions with that Scorpio polarity. There can be all kinds of grabs for power and control. There can be outright stealing of money and resources, be it individuals who make off with a jewelry heist, or multinational corporations basically getting away without having to pay any taxes. We can look at an increase in betrayals with the Scorpio polarity. And in some respects, if a relationship is stagnating, that betrayal will serve to evolve the relationship one way or another. There could be several types of stories or perspectives in how that would happen. And along with the betrayal could be those feelings of abandonment, which again, throw us back in upon ourself, Taurus. And Scorpio, when it's lined up with separating forces, it's looking at how to game the system or manipulate anything. It will not play fair. It will not play by the rules. And we can have excessive misuse of all of the resources with Scorpio. Scorpio will take things to extreme, good or bad. So, we could have a scandal of some outrageous expenditure of money that a billionaire makes that becomes a tipping point for so many people that just say, no, when we have enough that are hungry like this, maybe something needs to change, because Uranus is the big social revolutionizer. Stay tuned. So those are just some key bullet points for you whenever Uranus is retrograde, which again we'll do once a year for 5 months. We're going to start with Venus and Mars, because we have retrograde cycles for both of them. And guess what? They both make major aspects to Uranus. Starts with Mars turning retrograde the end of June to the end of August. It's a short retrograde. Mars is usually retrograde anywhere from 10 to 15 days longer than this retrograde. And you can see it's from 9 Aquarius all the way back to 28 Capricorn. So Mars this summer is going to make 3 last quarter squares to Uranus from Aquarius to Taurus. And then right after that is done, Venus is going to make 3 oppositions to Taurus through its retrograde October 5th through November 16th, going retrograde at 11 Scorpio back to 25 degrees Libra. So Uranus no sooner than ingresses into Taurus, and these 2 personal retrogrades start, and everywhere you have an insecurity that needs to be addressed, its buttons will get pushed. And what will be one of the main factors? Trust issues. Who can I trust? Can I trust my intimate partner if I'm in a relationship? Can I trust my boss that my job will be secure? Can I trust the government not to, rip me off or, game the system for the rich at the expense of the poor? And of course, this is going to really have us turning inward to learn how to trust ourselves and to learn how to create that inner security and self-reliance. We can also see quite easily an increase of social activism. Mars turning retrograde in Aquarius, the sign Uranus rules. We've already seen the gun control activism by the young adults. If you're paying attention to the news, there's been one major teacher strike, I think it was Virginia, and now I think Oklahoma's looking to do it. There's a half a dozen states that the teachers are looking at going on strike in mass, statewide in the United States, because they haven't had wage increases in 10 years. Stay tuned. There can be we could see social activism in almost every area. And when you break it down into resources, Taurus, between the haves and the have-nots, what we could start to see happening here is all of the different issue politics recognizing that they are stronger together. So you don't want police brutality, and you want better teachers' pay, and you want to see women get paid the same as men. Take your issue. We could easily see coalescing of issues coming together. And I've always said the bottom line is money. Taurus, Scorpio, my resources are resources. And, I won't belabor my public banking, but, is the interest going to go to the collective, or is it going to go to the hands of the few at the expense of the collective? So a lot of the outbursts of social activism will come wherever groups feel suppressed or controlled or manipulated. All of those, the betrayals that can happen on a collective level. And of course, with both of these retrograde cycles and in relationship to Uranus and any upsets it brings along, it's all about that intent to deepen our self-reliance, the ability to take care of our own needs versus being codependent upon the partner or being codependent upon the government to provide each and every little detail or food, clothing, shelter for us if we don't make any effort ourselves. And when these planets are retrograde, then just like the insecurities will get tested, Uranus going into Taurus, we'll see where we are feeling insecure and lack the self-reliance to do something about it. So just these aspects alone, these are not the only aspects that Venus or Mars make during their retrograde cycle. However, they're both impacted by Uranus, and so these could be a little bit stronger retrograde cycles than normal. This is the only Mars retrograde cycle that will make aspects to Uranus while it's in Taurus over the next 7 years. And then Venus will have a retrograde cycle, I think, in 2023 and 2025. Either 23-24 or 23-25. The last two Venus retrograde cycles during Uranus in Taurus will aspect Uranus. So even though Venus and Mars are only retrograde every other year, we're going to have a long lull before they aspect Uranus again, which means that this one, or these two retrograde cycles, could have more impact. Let's move on. Jupiter. Jupiter-Uranus, it's a 14-year cycle of liberating our individual belief systems, evolving those belief systems by leaps and bounds, or stubbornly clinging to a false or distorted belief for security reasons. We can refuse to evolve for a while. It just will create bigger upsets sooner or later. But I thought I'd just do a little review here with Jupiter and Saturn, because there are cycles with Uranus that we can consciously grasp. So look at here at Jupiter's last conjunctions. Excuse me, I always try to eat before doing a webinar, so I have energy, and you always get a burp. My apologies, just a little Uranian upset there. Here, remember the Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions 2010, 0 Aries, and then back to Pisces. Remember the oppositions just last year? Now we're going to be in the second half of a Jupiter-Uranus cycle all the way through Taurus. Remember, Uranus is approximately 7 years in a sign, and Jupiter and Uranus have approximately 14-year cycles. So half of the Jupiter-Uranus cycles typically in one sign, half in the other. Now it could just be split up that it's the back end quarter of a sign, a full sign, and the front quarter of another sign. It doesn't always just line up by the 0 and 29 degrees. It just happens to at this point in time. We're only going to have one Jupiter waning in conjunct this fall, then go into the sesquisquadrates. Before that, though, let's just review. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions were the midterm elections. Remember the Tea Party having a fit, that we passed a health care bill in the United States. Thank you, international listeners, for the U.S. examples. And remember, we can look back on it now. Can you see how the conservatives or racially wounded souls could have just been in a state of shock over the fact that we actually elected a Black president? Now we can start to look back on this and go, oh, the Saturnian part of Uranus becomes the social dinosaur defending the past. And what did that lead up to then in these oppositions? That first opposition came just a month after the 2016 presidential election, electing an overtly racial, misogynistic U.S. president. And of course, we can look now at the fact that this growing recognition of how much social media interferes with news. And in case you're interested, it's not just Facebook. If you don't want big corporations keeping track of you and your data and your statistics, you have to literally unplug 100%. what did I see in the media today? You download Starbucks. They collect data on you and your friends. You download Netflix, collects all kinds of information and data on you. It really will behoove us, Uranus, to wake up, and Jupiter to really look for the truth of something here. So as we move into this waning inconjunct, its full phase, what we are starting to see is a swing back to, I understand that most of you who will listen to these webinars are probably progressively orientated. You're probably more inclusively orientated than exclusive. And we thought we were really initiating something in this Jupiter-Uranus cycle. And now here we are coming off of this opposition shock and going, well, the second half of the circle is the collective. First half me, second half collective. So here again, we can start to see some of those socially progressive efforts going, what are we going to do? Are we going to settle for this type of a country in the United States if this is what, where we live? We could also start to see some necessary financial corrections and resource sharing, not only from the moment Uranus goes into Taurus, but the waning inconjunct is 210 degrees on the 360 circle. In the natural zodiac, that's 0 Scorpio. Scorpio, shared resources. So even though we only have this one inconjunct, which comes, by the way, just after the U.S. midterm elections, someone's going to be shocked again. Someone's going to be having to make changes. Stay tuned. To the degree we are actively involved is to the degree to which we can realign with natural law. Now, here's the rest of Jupiter through the second half of its cycle with Uranus, trine, square, sextiles, 3 waning sesquisquadrates, okay, semi-squares. This is where we'll go from last quarter square right here to balsamic square, but they're a little ways away until we have the next conjunction, which will happen before Uranus leaves Taurus here, 22 degrees Taurus. So we're going to continue through this second half, and it's going to be all the way through it. Jupiter, Uranus, who's going to control the money and the resources? Taurus. Here's one more for you. Are you aware that Jupiter is waning to all 5 outer planets? I lump Chiron in there for ease of conversation. Here's Jupiter's conjunction starting in 2020. Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, and finishes up with Uranus. In the span of 4 years, beginning of next decade, Jupiter's going to conjunct all 5 outer planets. That's going to be a lot of change. And Jupiter has growth and expansion. Sometimes Jupiter has loss to open up space to expand into. And so waning all these outer planets, Jupiter, it's going to expose where, okay, you cannot go forward anymore until you learn something else or take something else into consideration. There's a reason why there's Jupiter-Saturn as a planetary pair, growth and decay. Without Saturn, Jupiter wouldn't stop eating until it weighed 1,000 pounds. Saturn provides discipline to close the bag of potato chips, so to speak. But as Jupiter is in this second half to these outer planets and waning to the conjunctions, You will have Jupiter really pondering on a philosophical level. And Jupiter to Uranus, it will be part of this picture that we're going to call ethical debates with Uranus and Taurus. And so Jupiter is going to say, well, wait a minute, what do we think in regards to equal pay for men and women? You know, wait a minute, what do we think in regards to healthcare being a right versus a privilege? Pick your subject. What do we think about racial inequality? You know, what do we think about, you know, men being able to dominate women and demand sex for a promotion at work? So Jupiter will be really active with all the outer planets, and Uranus is going to bring those spontaneous awarenesses and upsets and the social movements that then go, no more, enough is enough. And of course, this is going to then include all of the survival issues that will come up through Uranus and Taurus because of the effect of climate change. The infrastructure that is, you know, all you got to do is look in the United States and the 3 major hurricanes and the damage they did in 2017, and half the people in Puerto Rico don't even have electricity yet. And as we spoke in the first class, you know, there will be increasing housing displacements. So Jupiter will have ethical debates over, you know, do we provide federal flood insurance for you to rebuild your home after it's been flooded 5 times because it's below sea level? Stay tuned. Money is going to be the bottom line on a lot of changes through Uranus and Taurus. And it'll all depend upon how much the masses demand that it be shared fairly. We'll also, you know, have most likely expanding debates and issues around the morality of fighting war forever. These young kids, I've been waiting for these Pluto and Libra, Scorpio and Sagittarius to grow up. These young kids, just like they're saying, you know, no more weapons of war in the United States, we need better gun control. They're going to grow up, and excuse my language, they're going to say, fluff these wars forever. We can't continue that way. So, and refugees is a Jupiter Sag word. You know, we get displaced from our natural environment. We are looking for the lost tribe that we can relate to. We're going to continue to become a global community. And, you know, Jupiter, Uranus can be those who want to be socially diverse and those who say, no, you cannot come to my country. So, and of course, all the ethical issues over technology outpacing morality. We've talked a little bit about these, you know, the gene manipulations that are going on, you know, the human-robot interfaces bringing about an artificial intelligence, you know, the right to an abortion on demand, or the right to, you know, support life, find the balance between it. And social media, you know, Jupiter is writing and public speaking and publishing, and so it gets involved with Uranus technology and all the social media. You can just follow the Jupiter-Uranus aspects and keep caught up with all of the technology stuff. Right now we have Jupiter full phase to Uranus. It's just moving beyond, well, it's moved beyond the actual opposition aspect, but in full phase, It's my freedom and my personal rights versus your ability to use your technology in sneaky, secretive ways to know more about me than I think you should have the right to know. And then I mentioned, health insurance costs, rights versus privileges. So we can expect Jupiter, Uranus to continue being quite active in the second half of their cycle. And we'll look at the same thing with Uranus. Now with Saturn and Uranus, the cycle expands to 45 years. That's quite a bit of a long cycle. It, typically half a lifetime unless it gets cut short. But it's a 45-year cycle of social maturation, individually and collectively. How Uranus is deconditioning all the Saturnian conditioning factors in our life as individuals and collectively as groups of people and countries. So these two planets get very involved in social rebellions and revolutions. Now, they last had their conjunctions in the late 80s, as you can see there in those later degrees of Sagittarius. Who remembers the 5 Saturn-Uranus oppositions in Virgo Pisces 08, 09, 010? November 4th, 2008 was the presidential election. It was the day Barack Obama was elected in the United States. Remember that? But what also was going on during that time period is, remember in 2009, 2010, hold on, I'm checking my little sheet here. I gotta get this right. We had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions. So while these oppositions were going on, Saturn opposing Uranus, Jupiter was conjuncting Uranus. There was that interlap right there between, again, the Tea Party time period, the Obamacare, the real outbreak starting to come forth in regards to racial issues in the US that kind of gelled and expanded but weren't really exposed until 2015-16 with the last presidential election. Here is what Saturn has been doing last year, the waning trines to Uranus. It will have the last quarter squares. I didn't go in and go to all the detail with Saturn being conjunct and the sesquisquadrates. Apologies, just didn't have all the time to that. Stay tuned for that during the weekly podcast if you want to. I talk about all those minor aspects week to week, month to month. But Saturn's in a waning sextile or waning half of a cycle to Uranus as well. They won't have their next conjunction until one in the tail end of Gemini. So Saturn's second half of the cycle with Uranus, back to these oppositions that came along of Virgo Pisces with 1. So the second half of Saturn's cycle to Uranus is Aries, Taurus, Gemini. And Saturn is also waning to these 4 outer planets as well. Jupiter's conjunctions go 2020 through 2024. Saturn takes a lot longer, but just recognizing this from a broad perspective. Jupiter waning all its outer planets. Saturn waning all its outer planets. This is how so much of our social structures are breaking down. Jupiter, Saturn. And I remind you of that because in a few slides here, we're going to look at Uranus doing the opposite. It's waxing to Neptune and Pluto. Very interesting interface. So Saturn surrendering to all 4 outer planets is recognizing what we can and cannot do. You know, Saturn is form. Saturn is space-time reality. And so Saturn, you know, it can have that discipline to really go after goals and try to accomplish something. But when it's waning too, all four outer planets, whatever is not sustainable for Saturn is not going to work out. It's going to crumble in some way. But Saturn will then also, in this waning path, be searching for the ways and methods to move past anything it perceives as a limitation. Because Saturn has those boundaries of space-time and the three outer planets, they will have the sparks for how Saturn can evolve. And it will take off with each of those planets as it moves past the conjunctions with each of those planets. So in other words, all the Uranian sparks and future-orientated messages and the blueprints of evolution, they have to come through and be manifested through Saturn space-time forms. And what does that start to then bring in for us? Uniform versus cataclysmic evolution. If I mention Saturn and doing the day-to-day work, you think uniform evolution, slow Darwinic evolution. I go to my job week after week after week after week after week, and I slowly build up my little nest egg. Versus Uranus, it is more known for cataclysmic evolution. It's like I said in the first class, or the first webinar, you pay attention to the element of repetition with future-orientated messages as they come again, 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 again. If they keep coming, then you've got to make that effort to change, or you're going to get the cataclysmic upset from Uranus in Taurus in your world. And yet these two, between the uniform and cataclysmic evolution, that Saturn has upsets, Uranus can also do the day-to-day thing. I'm speaking more archetypically, generally. But together, what they do is you can track social change through these two planets as much as you can, say, Uranus-Pluto and their waxing squares or the conjunctions of the 60s. These two still have a lot to do with the grind of social change. And of course, part of this social change with these two as well, especially in the second half of their cycle, is the debates over how to share the world's resources, Uranus and Taurus, with increasing population, Saturnian reality, and of course all the effects of climate change, Saturnian realities and Uranian upsets. They could be part of the picture in saying there must be some redistribution of resources on planet Earth. I'm beginning to think those are the two major themes of Uranus. Money, who controls it? How do we create policies around it? And resources. Money and resources, Uranus and Taurus. With Chiron, Chiron and Uranus have an extremely erratic cycle together. I mean, their cycle, one cycle to another cycle can vary 40 years difference. So it's not really a number that I've not seen an astrologer put a number on a Uranus-Chiron cycle. But you can just see in your example right here from 1898 to 2042, that's about 140 some years in this cycle. We do know, though, that as a planetary pair, these two are about our ability to self-heal unconscious traumas and wounds, Uranus-Chiron. And of course, it will be about making the trauma conscious in order to heal. And if we're not, we can have a lot of re-imprinting of wound and trauma. We can do it individually. We can do it collectively. We can feel helpless. Chiron, the centaur, who was, I think, shot with an arrow in his ankle and he couldn't heal the wound. The helplessness that he traded his mortality for death to be free of the wound. So there's effort needed with Chiron Uranus in being able to heal, or we sink into the helplessness and despondency. Now, what's interesting about these two in that long cycle is between 2009 and 21, Chiron is making 26 waning semi-sextiles to Uranus. There was just a couple in Aquarius Pisces, and then 17 in Pisces Aries. We're finishing up with that, and we're now going to have 6 of them in Aries Taurus as Chiron moves into Aries April 17th. Uranus moves into Taurus May 15th, 2018. So Uranus through Taurus, or excuse me, Uranus through Pisces, Chiron through Pisces. Can you see how they've been all about trying to heal the old wounds of the Piscean age? Jeffrey Green's teachings always used to say that whenever you had a transition of the ages, ending of the Piscean age, dawning of the Aquarian age, nobody has an exact date, but there would be at least several hundred years in which there was an orb of influence in the transitioning, and the age that was ending could be broken down to break those old patterns, to start afresh in the new age. Now, Age of Aquarius is definitely going to have some of them Uranian upsets to change things and really have us break free. I just think a waning semi-sextile is the last 30 degrees. It's balsamic phase. It is about healing karma, just the aspect alone, without these signs. And it's recognizing the ultimate healer and the ultimate resource, Chiron Uranus, is universal source, and really tapping into source to help us heal. And as they now go into Aries Taurus with these waning semi-sextiles, Chiron and Aries can have all kinds of new ideas and how we get along together on planet Earth so that we can keep up with the changes that are coming. Recognizing we're all in it together with Uranus and Taurus, food, clothing, and shelter. So here are the dates in which Chiron makes these waning semi-sextiles to Uranus. We actually have 7 more to go. One of them goes back to Pisces, Aries. Otherwise, they're all in Aries, Taurus here. I think from, a collective perspective, there are a lot of wounded social groups. We've been talking about them. That's all we do as astrologers probably. And so Chiron can have its part of the play in that waning half of the cycle to Uranus and going, wait a minute, this group is tired of being oppressed. This group is tired of not being able to stand up and have fairness and equality with another group. Whether it's the women's suffragette movement and women gaining a right to vote, or racial inequalities or monetary inequalities, Chiron can have a part of social activism with Uranus. If you want to, you can keep track of these dates, and whenever it comes along, you do a review. Where do I still feel a little wounded? What can I do in healing myself? And as I heal, how can I be a participant on planet Earth? How can I be working to initiate more security in my world as I recognize how it ultimately comes from source regardless? And of course, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are all extremely active in the background here. Your astrological calendars do not mention the aspects Uranus makes to Neptune or Pluto. And yet they will be quite active. Let's look at Neptune first here. And by the way, if you want more details on these Uranus aspects to Neptune, I did a free webinar on it, and it's posted on our YouTube page. I think it's, you can, Evolutionary Astro Net on YouTube, and you can go get more detail on this if you'd like. But together, Uranus-Neptune represents a 172-year cycle of spiritual evolution and revolution. Uranus-Neptune, the interface of science, technology, and religion, spirituality. And oh, by the way, the interface of the ending of the Piscean age, which is ruled by Neptune, and the beginning of the Aquarian age, which is ruled by Uranus. And I love this quote: as technology advances, remember, you are the most brilliant creation. I just love that one. The gal's name is Sophia Stone, if you can't read that. So, just briefly, here's their conjunctions. They had a conjunction in 1821 in Capricorn, the Industrial Revolution cycle. They had conjunctions in 1993, later in Capricorn, the Technological Revolution cycle. And you all know what happened after this conjunction. Their next one in another 170 some years is going to be 6 Aquarius, and I'm tentatively calling this one the Aquarian Age initiation cycle. The 1993 cycle, Capricorn, seed thoughts, energizing the physical world, inventions and materialism, the technological explosions that have happened in our world. Before 1993, you did not have these things. You had a TV. Some of us may have had our first computers. My first computer was 1995. I remember that. I paid $3,000, and I literally took out a credit card loan to buy my first computer, which was as big and bulky as they come. But just look at how everything has emerged since then. And I just want you just quickly, World Wide Web, www.evolutionaryastrology.net, the www, 1989. The first computer operating systems, Linux, lost out to Microsoft, although I think Linux might still be around. Just look at, you know, the companies that just came up here. And computers nowadays, you know, a cell phone has more number crunching ability than a military computer from 50 years ago. So that was their last conjunction in 1993, 1819 Capricorn. Now, Uranus is making 5 waxing semi-squares to Neptune, moving from new phase to crescent phase. You've already seen, we've already had these first few aspects. When Uranus turns retrograde or Neptune turns retrograde, or they're slowing down, there will be another one right here this summer, and Uranus will move back, well, it'll move back into new, back into new phase. It'll move into crescent. When it gets to this last waxing semi-square, it'll be in crescent phase 2019 to 3941. So these semi-square aspects between Uranus and Neptune have two themes. Uranus in Aries has been all the inventions, all that technological stuff we just mentioned. Now as Uranus goes into Taurus, it's the sustainment of everything that has exploded. Do we want to see Facebook just continue to be able to collect everything on us without us knowing? Or is Uranus-Neptune going to have a morality debate and pass laws that says you don't have a right to that? Will it do that to every company? Now, I just wanted to give you a visual with these so you understand that. EA uses the 360 cycle of phases and aspect. And so you take the slower moving planet, and as if it's 0 degrees, wherever it is in the circle, I'm just using a natural circle here, Uranus has moved 45 degrees beyond. And again, these 5 waxing semi-squares going into crescent, back to new, into crescent, back to new, and then into crescent phase for 20 years. So again, that crescent phase between Uranus and Neptune, and even now as it's doing the aspects, it's a struggle to review those new beginnings. And what are we happy with? And what are we not happy with? And how does it have to evolve and change? And because crescent phase is yin, it's energy moving back to center. And remember we said how Uranus is technology and Neptune is spirituality. Uranus is waxing to Neptune and Pluto. So Uranus technology wants to lead the way with this and that and everything in no regard to ethics or morality. And yet when it goes into crescent yin phase, then what we'll have is that spiritual, ethical, moral reviews and adjustments of technology. And this can go all the way down into laws, initial conjunctions in Capricorn. Just review their conjunction from the 1820s and the Industrial Revolution that came from that. And the massive social displacements when, you know, the steam engine, you know, replaced guys shoveling coal into, you know, whatever, I don't know the details of that, but just think of all, you know, factories started replacing sewing clothes by hand. Machines started spinning the wool. I mean, everything that went on during that time period. Can you even fathom what it's doing now? If we just look at Uranus-Neptune, new phase from 1993 to 2018. So Uranus and Taurus, in some ways, there will be some areas where Taurus will actually slow down the technology, but there will be other ways where it'll still just continue as fast as it can, unless humans stand up and say there must be a bigger picture to this. And so Uranus moving into crescent phase with Neptune, it's going to have debates around everything we spoke about in the first webinar a couple nights ago, and everything we're talking about right now. And probably one of the biggest debates that will go on is it will become harder and harder and harder for religion to deny science. Uranus and Taurus will have a lot to do with practicality, earth, physical, practical. and Neptune, finishing up in Pisces until 25, 26. We said before that both Uranus and Neptune will change signs. Uranus into Gemini, Neptune into Aries, the middle of the next decade, that 25, 26 time period. And so as Uranus is in Taurus relating to Neptune in Pisces, we're going to want to have a practical side to religion and spirituality. And almost rightly so, because it will help us perhaps get past some of these religious dogmas that we have. Literally, a woman can't drive a car in a third world country. Women having to cover everything except the slits in their eyes with the, what do they call it? I don't know what they call that, the head to toe dress that they have to wear. It may not change overnight, but we'll be pondering the ethics of everything, the morality of every subject. And technology will serve spirituality to the degree that we demand it. As I said before, there'll be all kinds of body parts that computers can print out. And is it going to be okay to start using that stuff? Just, take your pick of your issue as you're thinking about it. And know that with these semi-square aspects, there's a debate going on. Maybe these Uranus-Neptune semi-squares are helping create the turning point in the United States with the whole issue of assault rifles and gun control and universal background checks and a, federal technology that keeps track of anybody who has a domestic violence guilt or a mental deficiency. Uranus and Taurus can help us become practical with a lot of issues. Taurus is about simplification. You can break it down into what is the essence that I need to survive: food, clothing, shelter. And so some of these ethical debates will be where, for instance, as we said, US 5% of resources, 25%, 5% of population using 25% of the world's resources. I think it could be quite possible in the United States that we start selling less stuff with Uranus and Taurus, because of what we recognize is a damage to the environment or needs to be more equitably shared, or we don't need to waste our precious income on, this and that and this and that. Not to say that it can't go the opposite. Uranus and Taurus can have some, souls in the US, wanting to have 3 vehicles, one for the summer, one for winter driving, and, one to show off in on Saturday night dates or something. It can go the extremes of the materialism. But I also think the wake up of Uranus is going to be a lot of simplifying with the whole resource usage. And these Uranus-Neptune aspects will have a major voice in it, even if we're not aware of it, even if we don't recognize that this is what is happening. Now, as Uranus goes through, I did put a couple of issues in, with the public versus private banking, looking at everything from this moral or ethical perspective. Uranus and Taurus, could there be an evolving moral acceptance that resources need to be more equitably shared? And if there is any more increased concentration of resources, the 0.01% having more and more and more, it's only going to make for a larger swing to level the playing field. And individuals will get socially active to the degree they feel morally right. And again, the teacher's example, and in the US, the changing demographics, and they're probably, with the US just waging war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the issues in Iraq bleeding into Syria, there isn't a country on the planet that doesn't have changing demographics of its citizenry. We can just all, we can fly across the ocean in a day. It's just a lot more easier to be mobile. And so every country is becoming diversified, whether it wants to or not. How are we going to deal with this? How are we going to take those steps into becoming the global community? Before we get there, though, there'll be individuals just wanting gender fairness, gender civil rights, wanting to feel safe in their environments, Taurus. So don't discount these semi-squares and crescent phase for the moral input to the social activism. And of course, we can see, here in the US, gun control laws becoming more and more morally acceptable. And even training our police to disable someone, not kill them. Shoot someone in the foot and you'll slow them down real good. Leroy knows that one. He did that to himself when he was a kid. Uranus will continue on while it's in Taurus, and it's going to get to the very tail end of its transit through Taurus, and it'll move into Gemini, and it'll actually make waxing sextiles to Neptune, still in the crescent phase. But when it gets to that waxing sextile and gets to the middle 2020s, we could have explosive growth again. Growth of beliefs, ideas, but growth of technology as well. Can you imagine as Uranus restabilizes itself, cross our fingers for the most part, in Taurus, it goes into Gemini, and Uranus or Neptune goes into Aries and starts a brand new 165-year spiritual cycle. Whew, things could take off. So even though there's a lot going on the end of this decade, the beginning of next decade, and we get to the middle of next decade, and the US gets past its Pluto return, and Pluto goes into Aquarius 2023-24, Uranus Gemini, Neptune Aries 2025-26. Whew. We could just explode. And so the amount of progressive growth we make between now and the mid-20s, will determine how well we do on planet Earth. It's not a guarantee. We could still have, the distortion of all kinds of ideology and brainwashing with Gemini Aries, and leading up to that, it remains to be written. That's why I sometimes think there's going to be Uranus and Taurus financial upsets out of necessity, to create more resource fairness and change of monetary policies, just so that the human species survives Taurus on planet Earth. Stay tuned, remains to be written. Here's Uranus and Pluto. This is a 127-year cycle of course, revolutions, Uranus, Pluto, but also evolution on a soul level. And again, this is individual and this is collective. And so Uranus, Pluto will tear things down in order to move forward. And it's basically because together they act like evolving forces that overcome resisting forces that desire to be secure on a soul level. And yet, the most natural law in the universe, evolution, evolving, change. So between the two of them, they also have uniform evolution and cataclysmic evolution. And you all probably know the Uranus-Pluto conjunctions in the 1960s, the waxing squares that we had 2012 through 2015, but they're not done with their aspects. First of all, Dalai Lama. It is not enough to be compassionate. You must act. And Uranus is social activism no matter what sign it's in. You know, these are my words for this, but I went back a Uranus-Pluto conjunction cycle to the 1850s, and I called it the social progress revolution cycle. The Uranus-Neptune, the Industrial Revolution, and then the 1820s, and then the Uranus-Pluto in the 1850s. I mean, we have made a lot of social progress in some areas of the world. You can't own a slave in the United States anymore. Women do have the right to vote. We do have some social progress on paper, even if that's not how it turns out to be in reality. But as I was thinking then about their conjunctions in the mid-60s in Virgo, you know, we're repeating all of the stuff from the 60s. And those of you who followed my Chiron and Aries webinars, I highly recommend the archetypes and cycles of Chiron and Aries, because it was so related to these 1966 conjunctions and the activism and riots and everything that went on then. But as I really pondered it, I thought, we're going to look back on this Uranus-Pluto conjunction in Virgo, and it's going to be about climate change and survival. You know, Uranus is about survival in Taurus, but Pluto, the soul, is, are you alive or dead? I mean, you get down to the bare basics on a soul level with Pluto. And Virgo is an earth sign as well. And are we going to take care of our sandbox, planet Earth? Virgo, taking care of something, nurturing it? Or are we going to mess it up? Virgo. And the Pisces polarity, neglect. So stay tuned. We'll see if that's kind of how it looks. But whether we were conscious of it or not by those mid-60s, you know, the planet was starting to recognize we got a lot of human interference, and you got to start taking care of things instead of messing it up all the time, Virgo. So Pluto in Capricorn, undercurrent to all other faster moving planets. We've seen Pluto in Capricorn since 2008. Plutocrats, those, the 1%, the white race, the Christianity, and you can add in, you know, some of the extremes of Islam if you want to, but they're all trying to maintain that Capricornian control as everything changes around us. Specifically here in the US, we can continue to see political, social, and economical crumbling until the first Pluto return. This is a soul crisis we're undergoing collectively as a country, and a self-crisis over who we are and how many of us are going, I do not like the example coming out of the White House. Well, sometimes we learn by example and sometimes we learn by contrast. So we're seeing the contrast of who we do not think we are, who we do not want to be. Here's the Uranus aspects. Uranus, remember, 7 waxing squares, 90 degrees to Pluto. Well, in the cycle of phases and aspects, Uranus is now going to make 7 waxing biseptiles to Pluto. You're going, what is a biseptile? Here are the dates, 2018 through 2021, all in 2 Earth signs, Taurus and Capricorn. And so Pluto in Capricorn is going to attempt to keep the lid on everything, the upper hand, all the control. And Uranus in Taurus is going to break down anything that is not sustainable. Now, here is the visual, and then we'll look at the biseptile. Again, the slower moving planet in the natural zodiac would go at the 0 mark, and then you go counterclockwise to get to the degrees of the faster moving planet. This is the aspect within the first quarter, crises in action, excuse me. Uranus has moved 10, 12 degrees beyond the squares, okay? It will not make the waxing trines until 2026, 28 in Gemini, Aquarius. Remember those mid-20s again? This could be a beautiful aspect if we're making the effort to bust out, break free, do it differently, and realign with what's natural right here through these biseptiles. So a biseptile exists within the first quarter phase. It is energy moving outward. It's yang. But the septiles, let me just back up for you, for anybody who's new to this. The septile is the harmonics of 7. It is taking the circle and dividing it by 7. You start at 0, 1, septile 2, biseptile 3, triseptile 4, tri 5, bi 6, and a septile 7. So it's the 7th harmonic. And what astrology has observed correlated, or EA anyway, is that all septiles bring a sense of special destiny and alignment with a necessary path of evolution. So first quarter phase is a crisis in action. You've got to manifest the new form between any 2 planets. You've got to manifest the purpose of those 2 planets as they are evolving together. And so what happens in that first quarter when you're wanting to manifest it, it's very individualized, okay, versus last quarter disseminating and last quarter being society and the other. And so we are wanting to, again, manifest it and work with it from a very personal level. And it actually is the carry-on from the septile that came before. And so what happens with this sense of special destiny, it also works as what we would call an element of fate. meaning it works to realign the two planets, however they are meant to evolve. So these two words, sense of special destiny and an element of fate, with Uranus and Pluto. And think about this on big, broad, collective levels. What we have going on here is, of course, the consensus consciousness in general, which is known to be Saturn, is afraid of the changes happening in societies from the Uranus and Pluto first quarter squares, those 7 squares from 2012 to 2015. And Pluto in Capricorn, now along with Saturn in Capricorn, emphasizing this, wants to hold on to the past, wants to cling to tradition. And it becomes even more vulnerable because that consensus consciousness that can't think beyond the space-time it was born into can be very conditioned, for instance, in regards to racial differences, in regards to, immigration differences, people from different countries and, different belief systems. How do we learn how to get along together? And Uranus and Taurus, some of the distortions of this can come through, well, there's not enough money for me. There's not enough resources for me. I'm not going to share any resources with you. And so those fears, that is the backlash of the first quarter squares, that's what's going to be worked and addressed with these biseptile aspects. And it is going to come down to, can that consensus recognize the real issue? And that it doesn't matter what your race is, it doesn't matter what country you live in. Pluto in Capricorn's had such a concentration of wealth and equality. Uranus in Aries has been working to wake and break it up. How will Uranus and Taurus go forward with that? So the biseptile aspect is about realigning that evolutionary path. And yet, however, it's not guaranteed. What will Uranus and Taurus sustain? Will it sustain the racism of Capricorn and what were the fears that we've seen before? Or will it start to realign into, we're all in it together? So these biseptiles are going to be very dependent upon the degree of involvement by the masses. It can go inclusive or exclusive. Now, if you really look at it from the perspective in the US, the 2018 midterm elections look to show a potential for upset. And I'll show you a chart on that coming up here. And as we saw from the previous webinar, there's a lot of stressful aspects to the US Republican chart, the chart of the forming of the party. They really got a lot of things going on. But these biseptile aspects, 7 of them, they'll cover the US midterm elections, they'll cover the US 2020 presidential election. And I would be willing to bet that based upon how it went in 2016, there will be growing momentum to really make a shift in 2020. There were so many astrologers that said whoever got elected in 2020 was going to be a one-term president because of the Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto conjunctions in 2020. And of course, everybody thought that was going to be Hillary. Well, she did win the popular vote, but the way we have things set up, someone else was elected. And so what will these biseptile aspects do in regards to that? Taurus and Capricorn, They're both earth signs. One wants to control everything and the other wants self-control. Capricorn, Taurus. And so it's not it's not a stressful aspect, but it is an aspect that requires some type of change, some sense of change. So as you start to look at this, can you see how those from, say, the inclusive side of subjects feel a sense of, I've got to be a part of change. I don't like what happened in the US in the election. I got to be a part of doing it differently. And so will they be a part of, you know, realigning things? I think it will also involve us as well, just like, remember, Uranus waxing semi-square Neptune, yin phase, the moral debates, the ethical stuff. I think that will also happen around Uranus-Pluto due to the type of aspect. The first quarter biseptile, realigning the new forms along a necessary path of evolution. You can take it down to as broadly as, if we keep going the way we're going to burn up the planet and less of us will survive Taurus. There was an article in the media today, Associated Press, which still is pretty, you know, a neutral source of information. Some research was done, not on the economic cost, but if the United States switched from being a meat-eating species to a vegan species, we could support almost twice the population we have in this country. Here's an interesting little statistic. You know, I come from a farming family, and I'm very well aware of the waste that goes on with water and resources to produce a pound of beef. I don't think the US can continue to go in the directions it does. If we have more beef-eating countries, it will be at the expense of other countries not having enough resources. So Uranus and Taurus, biseptile Pluto and Capricorn, what are the debates we are going to have around food? What are the changes that we are going to make with technology? Are, you know, we going to settle for plants, meaning factories, that manufacture fake protein? That's on the rise. Are we going to support, you know, small family, being local to your food, or will it be run by just a few mega corporations? Again, we talked about that, you know, overweight and malnourished. This is just another one of those subjects that will come along with Uranus biseptile Pluto. Now, I think the subject that will really, really see the shift with these aspects is climate change. Climate change is going to force green energy to, green energy is already coming along on its own, not just wind power and solar power, but all kinds of green energy are going to continue to explode and take off out of necessity for survival. But I think that Uranus biseptile Pluto will really settle the debate on climate change, even to the point that there may be a few deniers, those who believe that the Earth is flat. But I just think that the vast majority will make that shift with climate change, even if it's just because of the Uranus and Taurus Earth events that you have no other choice but to recognize that that is what's going on. Financial issues. This would be an interesting one with Uranus bisectile Pluto, not to mention all the rest of the way through Uranus's transit in Taurus. Are they coming? Is it coming to a head? When Uranus goes into Taurus, either this May or next May, are we going to have some global financial upset somewhere? Because, you know, our stock market today is held up by speculation, not because they put it into research and development or what we would call old-fashioned R&D. And we have, again, the extremes of wealth. Who's going to control it? Will there be a realignment to have more equitable sharing of the money and the resources? Will we see those shifts in, you know, how we control monetary policy, be it cryptocurrency or be the public versus private banking? And so, you know, here again, just like Uranus Semi-square Neptune, find an area that's of interest to you. Find an area where you feel insecure or you feel passionate, and just ponder these aspects of realignment between Uranus and Pluto. And how is it happening in your world personally? And how are you choosing to be involved with it on a collective basis? That realignment, when you come down to survival on planet Earth, it can force a lot of wake-up calls real quickly. Excuse me, had to get a little bit of a drink in there. Any questions or comments from anybody? You're welcome to Q&A with Leroy, or he can speak up. You can unmute yourself, speak up. Oops, sorry, wrong way. I thought I would just mention Donald Trump's chart in case somebody was interested. Here's his chart on the inner wheel with the 29-degree Leo rising. And then I took the ingress of Uranus into Taurus, which is going to come again in mid-May. We have transiting Pluto here at about 21 Capricorn. As you can see, over the next couple of years, it is going to oppose his Saturn in Cancer and then his Venus in Cancer. So there may be some Pluto and Capricorn reckonings with responsibility and possibly with resources. And if we look at Uranus turning, going to, you know, Uranus spent 2017 going back and forth over his 8th to 9th house. And so as it's now just moved into the 9th house, is Uranus setting him free, Aries 9th, or Taurus 9th house? Are there some financial truths that are going to be exposed? You know, I can say I knew who Donald Trump was before he ran for office. I just thought of him as a socialite. I never did watch his TV show. But I just, you know, thought, I'd never knew he was really in real estate. And so perhaps many of us have gotten educated over the last year. And my intuitive hits have just been that he has pulled all kinds of fast deals with resources. And transiting Pluto opposes Saturn, it might all be coming home to light And as you see, we're going to have Saturn in Capricorn oppose the Cancer planets. Jupiter's going to catch up and oppose the Cancer planets. But Uranus over here in Taurus in the 9th house just might expose, 9th house, the truth, 9th house, of the reality, Taurus, of his world and his resources. Now, if by some chance he gets reelected, he would be 2020 to 24. Uranus in Taurus will not go over his midheaven until 2024-25. I do not see him getting reelected. I don't know if I see him lasting in office. But it's quite possible that as Uranus in Taurus gets closer and closer to this midheaven, there might be that classic 10th house fall from grace or loss of resources. And, you know, if we look at Uranus, Pluto from the perspective of the biseptiles, you know, is there a realignment with honesty in some way? If we look at it from the perspective of the Neptune, Uranus waxing semi-squares, you know, are the relationships that he has doing a lot of reflection in regards to who is this person? Stay tuned. We'll see. But, you know, all the time that Uranus was in Aries in the 8th house, I think it was possible for him to get away with the wheeling and the dealing and all the 8th house power grabs and controls and manipulations. But I think this Uranus transit through his 9th is just going to continue to expose a lie, reveal truth. Expose a lie, reveal truth. And it could have a real impact on his financial wherewithal, not to mention his own security, because Taurus ruling the 2nd house in his natal chart, so much of his security has been based upon other people's perceptions of him as being wealthy and full of resources. And if he loses that, it can have a real strong impact on him. Again, not looking at anything else in the chart, just wanting to briefly consider his chart. The nodal axis has two. It's not that it doesn't aspect Uranus again, but it has two big ones. November 5th, Uranus will be exactly square the nodes. And then in 2022, the North Node will conjunct Uranus. And, you know, with both of these aspects, it's about, you know, especially when it's square the nodes in the sky for all of us, breaking free from old patterns and recognizing that individualization process. And if we're not breaking free, deconditioning, individualizing, then we can remain stuck in all our old trauma and our social limitations. And, you know, the nodal axis is also, as always, an emotional opportunity. And so, you know, in both of these, there can be some emotional upsets that come along. And because this is transits in the sky, this is going to be active for every single one of us. So as we move through the second half of 2018, Uranus is square the nodes closer and closer and closer in orb to November, and then it'll continue on for a little while, December, January, and maybe even into February. So we're all going to start feeling this energy, and especially as Uranus gets into Taurus, and then a square by sign of the Leo Aquarius nodes. Where do you need to break free? It'll also have to do with that whole individualization process being about deepening your own inner self-reliance and your own inner security. And of course, I also think because of the emotions involved, and just because the nodes, are related to the moon and the moon's tides and climate events, Uranus and Taurus, it's very possible that these two aspects and the time around them can bring about some Earth event that really shifts climate change perspective on emotional levels. This waking up to it and going, it is real. And as a matter of fact, I've got to just look for a moment and see if any of those biseptiles, nope, the second biseptile is September 27th. And so the biseptiles there isn't one real close to the square the nodes in November 5th. However, here is the opening chart for the midterm elections in the United States and set for Washington, D.C. As some of us have talked before or kind of been aware, Uranus will be retrograde and it will be exactly square the nodes on November, what was it, November 5th, was it? Was the date, hold on, yep, November 5th. And then you can also see that Venus is retrograde here. Remember those Venus-Uranus oppositions? That's going to be active, and Venus is going to be square the nodes as well. I don't know if Venus squares the nodes 3 times with its retrograde or not. I'm going to venture to guess it does, okay? And then you see the moon's involved in all this. But we also have Uranus retrograde going back into Aries. And we also have the nodes ingressing into Cancer, Capricorn on election day as well. And then 2 days later, Jupiter will leave Scorpio and move into Sag. So just that midterm election chart shakes things up. I would say if you want to be active in helping that pendulum swing inclusive, be active, go for it, because this chart is there. It is with us in creating change. Just briefly, the Pluto generations. The Pluto and Leos are going to have last quarter squares. It can be a crisis over the use of resources, including the abuse or excess use of them. Will I have enough for retirement? How well am I simplifying or downsizing with the material world? This is not a be-all, end-all. This is just a bullet point, okay? Specifically toward resources. The Pluto and Virgo generation are going to have last quarter trines. They can have some resource rewards to the degree that there have been prior efforts. They can also have some guilt over resources, using, abusing. They can also never feel secure regardless of how many resources they have. And that's when Uranus and Taurus has got to shake it up and create that inner security rather than the Virgo worry warts. The Pluto and Libra generation will have waning inconjuncts at 210-degree aspect. So they have various adjustments they're having to make to their resources. They could perhaps feel thwarted in an effort to create resources. This can be coming just in general from the younger generations being talked about as not being able to get ahead as previous generations have done. So what will you do about it, Pluto Libras? Will you make the effort to realign or adjust the resources more equitably? The Pluto and Scorpios are going to have the oppositions to Uranus and Taurus. Now, these guys are the recyclers of the zodiac. So there's all kinds of things they could do. They could be motivated to have a maturation in relationship to resources. They too could go to excess with resources. Scorpio goes to extremes. Or they could really take off, especially perhaps as they're evolving into young adults. There could be some geniuses out there that really take the waste on the planet and, just leap us forward in regards to recycling. Wouldn't it be nice if this generation would clean up all the plastic in the ocean? Not that it's their responsibility, it's all of us have that responsibility, but these would be the ones that could invent something to do, make an effort to clean up the waste and recycle. And it's quite possible that some of these souls could see rewards from prior life efforts. In other words, Uranus in Taurus will be sitting on the Pluto polarity point for their soul, their evolutionary intent. And of course, the rewards could be receiving resources, but it could also be having resources taken away. It's going to depend on that individual prior life effort. And then the Pluto in Sagittarius, they're the waxing in conjuncts. So they're going to have to make an effort to create the resources. And what are the changes or adjustments that I need to make as I'm growing up to be an adult? The Pluto in Sagittarius is what I just recently found out they call Generation Z. So maybe the Pluto Scorpios are what they call the millennials. But somebody said those born in the mid-1990s to, I don't remember how long, but I just remember reading mid-1990s and I thought, oh, that's when Pluto switched to Sag. But they're Generation Z. Well, I don't know what they're going to do. Are they going to start over with Generation A next? But, these are the little philosophers of the zodiac. So they're going to be pondering, how do I use my resources wisely? The Pluto Scorpio Sag, born in the westernized worlds. I don't know, but I have a young adult, and then I have a niece and two nephews, some young ones that we're real close to. And, they were very wasteful with resources. Oh, so you had to buy me 3 pairs of gloves every winter because I couldn't manage to hold on to my gloves. Replace it with, their phone chargers or whatever else it is. I see Uranus and Taurus changing it for these two generations. And, these Pluto and Sag, they may jump ahead almost of the Pluto and Scorpios and go, wait a minute, we just can't continue on like the resources are indefinite. Mother Nature, matriarchal principles are abundant, but our patriarchal distortions do not use resources wisely. We wouldn't have the garbage dumps across the planet that we do if we had better morality towards wise use of resources. So these little ones could surprise us in their worlds and changing things a lot faster than we are making an effort to do so. All right, that's it for my slides. I may or may not have covered everything. It's always a never-ending subject matter. When we go into part 2 with Uranus and Taurus transiting through all the 12 houses, I'll make an effort to cover anything that I may have missed. I'll check in with everybody for a moment. Is there questions or comments on anything?
Nope, not a lot of Q&A activity tonight, but what was on the Q&A board was very entertaining. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Well, hey, now you know that Uranus and Taurus is going to be a lot more active with Neptune and Pluto right now, 2018-19, than what is actually out there and understood. So decide how you as an individual are going to choose to sustain yourself better with Neptune and Pluto's aspects. All right, everyone, I will see you next week. And as Leroy says, it looks like the even houses are still open for volunteers with the exception of the 6th house. So if you're interested, register, send in your birth data. First come, first serve. We'll fill in the rest of the houses. Thank you very much, everyone.